Welcome to Quest Voyages History Edition. Today, we're diving deep into historical myths and mind-blowing facts that challenge everything you thought you knew. We hear them in school, see them in movies, maybe even read them in, gasp, textbooks. But what if I told you that some of the most commonly believed facts about history are totally bogus? Join me as we embark on a journey through time to separate truth from fiction. First up, let's talk about one of the most persistent myths. Columbus discovered America in 1492. Spoiler alert, he didn't. I mean, come on people. How could Columbus have discovered a place that was already inhabited by millions of people? It's like walking into a crowded room and claiming to have discovered it first. Sure, Columbus landed in the Caribbean, but Leif Erikson and the Vikings were chilling in Canada way before that. We're talking 500 years earlier. They even established a settlement called L'Anse aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. So yeah, the whole Columbus discovered America thing definitely needs to go in the historical garbage bin. Speaking of Vikings, let's bust the horned helmet myth. Vikings didn't walk around with horns on their heads, no matter what TV shows and movies tell you. That's a 19th century romanticism fantasy. Artists back then loved to portray Vikings as these larger-than-life, almost mythical figures. But in reality, horned helmets would have been super impractical in battle. Real Vikings? They were way too practical for that. They wore simple helmets, often made of leather or metal, if they wore helmets at all. Okay, here's one that really needs to be cleared up. Napoleon Bonaparte was not unusually short. He was actually around 5'6", which was pretty normal for men of his era. The whole Napoleon complex? Yeah, that's a myth too. British cartoonists loved to portray Napoleon as this tiny, angry man trying to compensate for his lack of height. But in reality, Napoleon was actually taller than the average Frenchman at the time. So where did we get this idea that Napoleon was short? Well, part of it might be due to different units of measurement. Back then, they used French inches, which was slightly longer than British inches. Chapter 4. Nero and the Great Fire of Rome. Separating fact from fiction. Picture this, Rome is burning, and there's Nero casually strumming his lyre, right? It's a vivid image that has captured the imagination of many. Wrong. Nero wasn't even in the city when it burned. He was miles away, in his villa at Antium. This myth has been around for centuries, but the truth is he was actually part of the rebuilding effort afterward. He returned to Rome as soon as he heard the news. The story goes that Nero, this notoriously cruel and power-hungry emperor, watched with amusement as Rome went up in flames. It's a tale that paints him as a villain. But like many juicy historical rumors, this one is based on shaky evidence and the whispers of Nero's enemies. They had their own reasons to tarnish his reputation. Contemporary accounts suggest that Nero rushed back to Rome to organize relief efforts, even using his own money to help the homeless and rebuild the city. He opened his palaces to shelter the displaced. So why did this myth stick around for so long? It's a question worth pondering. Well, Nero wasn't exactly Mr. Popularity. His actions and policies made him many enemies. He was known for his extravagance, his ruthlessness, and for persecuting Christians. These traits made it easy for people to believe the worst about him. Chapter 5. The Dancing Plague of 1518. Mass Hysteria or Medical Mystery. Now, here's one that feels like it was plucked straight out of a horror movie. The Dancing Plague of 1518. Hundreds of people supposedly danced themselves to death in the streets of Strasbourg. It sounds unbelievable, but the records from that time are quite clear. Was it mass hysteria or something more sinister? Theories have ranged from the plausible to the downright bizarre. Some say it was a stress-induced psychogenic illness, a collective response to the hardships of the time. Others believe it's just an exaggerated myth, a story that grew more fantastical with each retelling. Imagine this, it's a hot summer day in Strasbourg, and suddenly a woman starts dancing uncontrollably in the street. She can't stop, and neither can anyone else who joins her. She keeps going for hours, even days. Her feet are bleeding but she can't stop, and then more people join in, and before long there are hundreds of people dancing in a frenzy. The scene is chaotic and terrifying. Theories abound about what caused this bizarre outbreak. Was it a form of mass hysteria or something more tangible? Some historians believe it was a form of mass psychogenic illness triggered by stress, famine, or even fear of disease. Others think it might have been caused by ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold that grows on damp rye. Chapter 6. Pyramid Power, Busting the Myth of Slave Labor. Here's another myth that Hollywood loves to get wrong. The Egyptian pyramids were built by slaves. In fact, archaeological evidence shows that skilled laborers were hired and even provided with beer and food for their efforts. These workers were not just any laborers, they were highly skilled and organized. Guess it was a pretty sweet gig. Imagine getting paid in beer and food for building one of the wonders of the ancient world. For years we've been fed this image of thousands of slaves toiling away in the hot sun, dragging massive stones to build these incredible monuments. This image has been perpetuated by movies and books. Archaeologists have uncovered workers' villages near the pyramid sites, complete with bakeries, breweries, and even cemeteries. These discoveries paint a very different picture of the pyramid builders. These findings suggest that the pyramid builders were skilled laborers who were paid for their work and even took pride in their craft. They were part of a well-organized workforce that was essential to the construction of these monumental structures. They weren't slaves, they were architects, engineers, and artisans who were part of a massive, well-organized workforce. Their contributions were crucial to the success of these incredible architectural feats. Chapter 7. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, was Greek? We all think of Cleopatra as the ultimate Egyptian queen, right? Not so fast. Cleopatra was actually Greek. She was the last ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line that descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. Cleopatra's family had ruled Egypt for centuries, but they maintained their Greek culture and language. Cleopatra herself was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language. So while she might not have been ethnically Egyptian, she embraced Egyptian culture and is remembered as one of Egypt's most iconic rulers. Chapter 8. Gladiator Myths, More Than Just Blood and Gore. Those intense gladiator battles we see in movies? Yeah, most of them didn't end in death. These warriors were valuable assets, and many fights were more about skill and entertainment than bloodshed. Gladiators were often slaves or prisoners of war who were rigorously trained in various fighting styles. They were expensive to train and maintain, so their owners had a vested interest in keeping them alive. Gladiators who fought well and survived their matches could gain fame, fortune, and even their freedom. Chapter 9. The Great Wall of China. Not so great from space. Bet you've heard this one before? The Great Wall of China can be seen from space. Hate to break it to you, but that's a myth. While it's a colossal structure, the Great Wall isn't visible with the naked eye from space. The Great Wall is undoubtedly impressive, stretching for thousands of miles across northern China. But from space, it's simply too narrow and blends too well with the surrounding landscape to be seen without high-powered lenses. Chapter 10. George Washington's Teeth. The truth might surprise you and gross you out. Finally, let's settle this once and for all. George Washington didn't have wooden teeth. His dentures were made from a mix of human teeth, animal teeth, and ivory. Contrary to popular belief, Washington wasn't rocking a set of wooden chompers. Dental hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority back then, and Washington suffered from severe dental problems throughout his life. He lost most of his teeth at a young age and had several sets of dentures made from various materials, including ivory, gold, and even lead. Outro History is full of surprises. Subscribe for more myth busting. There you have it. 10 myths busted. History can be full of surprises, and the more we dig, the more we uncover. If you enjoyed this, check out my playlist for even more historical deep dives. And if you know of any mind-bending myths, drop them in the comments. I might just feature them in my next video.